Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a quiet moment in every life when we realize that time has been speaking to us all along, and we simply weren't listening. Days passed not because they were heavy, but because they were unattended. Hours slipped away, not stolen by others, but surrendered by us. Laziness does not announce itself as a villain. It arrives disguised as comfort, as delay, as tomorrow. And before we notice, the calendar has turned, and the life we meant to live is still waiting. We often imagine change as something dramatic, something that strikes like lightning, yet the truth is far simpler and far more demanding. Change begins when awareness wakes up, when we see that every breath is borrowed, every morning is an invitation, and every unfinished intention quietly accumulates interest. Faith teaches us that we were not created accidentally, nor designed for stagnation. There is purpose woven into our existence, a responsibility placed gently but firmly on our shoulders to grow, to act, to move. Laziness is not merely the absence of effort. It is the refusal to honor the gift of potential. It whispers that there is time, that urgency is unnecessary, that discipline can wait. But faith reminds us that time is sacred, and procrastination is often a subtle form of disbelief in our own calling. When we delay action, we delay becoming who we were meant to be. As 2025 approaches, it is not threatening us, it is revealing us. It asks a simple question: will you arrive as the same person, or as someone who finally chose obedience over comfort, action over excuses, intention over inertia? Awakening is not about force, it is about alignment. When the mind understands, the heart believes, and the body follows, laziness loses its grip. What remains is clarity, movement, and a quiet strength rooted in trust that when you rise, you are not walking alone, but stepping forward under guidance that has been waiting for you to move. Laziness rarely appears as something ugly or alarming. It doesn't knock on the door announcing failure. It settles in quietly, wearing the soft clothing of comfort and the polite mask of patience. It tells you that rest is deserved, that waiting is wise, that there is no harm in pausing a little longer. It speaks in a reasonable voice, one that sounds caring, even intelligent. This is why it is so difficult to confront. When laziness disguises itself as comfort, it convinces you that staying still is self-care rather than avoidance. When it disguises itself as patience, it persuades you that delay is maturity rather than fear. Comfort, in its true form, is meant to restore you, not replace your responsibility. But laziness twists comfort into a permanent residence. It turns short breaks into long stagnation. It teaches the body to prefer ease over effort and trains the mind to seek relief instead of growth. Slowly, the standard of living becomes the avoidance of discomfort rather than the pursuit of purpose. The danger is not that comfort exists, but that it becomes the highest value. When comfort is prioritized above calling, discipline begins to feel like punishment and effort feels unnecessary. Patience, too, is a powerful virtue, but laziness corrupts it by stripping it of action. True patience is active. It involves preparation, consistency, and faith-filled endurance. Lazy patience is passive. It waits without working, hopes without building, and trusts without moving. It says the time is not right, when the truth is the will is not ready. This form of patience delays responsibility while appearing wise. It allows a person to feel justified in inaction while time continues to move forward without mercy. One of the most deceptive aspects of this disguise is how reasonable it feels. Laziness does not urge you to abandon your dreams. It simply asks you to postpone them. It does not deny your potential. It suggests you will use it later. And because later feels harmless, you agree. Days turn into habits, habits into identity, and suddenly the person you intended to become feels distant, almost unfamiliar. The tragedy is not the loss of time, but the gradual dulling of urgency. Faith challenges this disguise directly. Faith does not reject rest, but it rejects stagnation. Faith does not rush blindly, but it does not tolerate excuses dressed as wisdom. When you believe that your life has meaning, that your abilities were entrusted to you intentionally, delay becomes a spiritual issue, not just a motivational one. Comfort becomes a test, and patience becomes a responsibility. Faith asks not only what you believe, but what you are doing with what you believe. Laziness thrives in environments where accountability is absent and clarity is avoided. It grows stronger when goals are vague and discipline is negotiable. It weakens when intention is made visible through action, even small action. The disguise begins to fall apart the moment you do something uncomfortable on purpose. Action exposes laziness because it reveals how little was actually standing in the way. What felt like exhaustion was often resistance. What felt like waiting was often avoidance. Breaking this illusion does not require intensity, it requires honesty. Honest recognition that comfort has overstayed its welcome. Honest acknowledgement that patience has been used as a shield. Honest awareness that movement, not motivation, is the real cure. When comfort returns to its rightful place, and patience is paired with effort, laziness loses its language, its logic, and its power. Time is not merely a backdrop against which life unfolds. It is an active force shaping who we become. Every moment carries weight, whether we acknowledge it or not. Time does not pause when we hesitate, and it does not slow down when we feel unprepared. It moves forward with quiet certainty, recording our choices not in words but in consequences. This is why time is never neutral. It is either invested with intention or spent through neglect, and both lead somewhere, whether we like the destination or not. Many people treat time as if it were endlessly forgiving, as though unused hours could be recovered later with interest. This illusion creates comfort in delay. But time does not store what we refuse to use, it simply passes. What remains is not extra opportunity, but a gap between who we are and who we were meant to be. Every day lived without direction subtly trains the mind to accept drift as normal. Over time, this drift becomes harder to correct, not because change is impossible, but because habits have been quietly reinforced. Faith gives time a sacred dimension. It teaches that moments are entrusted, not owned. Each morning arrives with silent expectations, asking how it will be honored. When time is treated as sacred, procrastination feels heavier, not because of pressure, but because of awareness. Delay is no longer harmless. It becomes a choice with spiritual weight. To waste time is not just to lose productivity, but to neglect purpose. This awareness can be uncomfortable, yet it is also liberating because it restores urgency without panic. Time exposes priorities more honestly than words ever could. What we consistently make time for reveals what we truly value. If growth important, time bends toward discipline. If comfort is supreme, time dissolves into distraction. Neutrality disappears when patterns are observed. A single day may seem insignificant, but repeated days form direction. This is why time is relentless in its honesty. It does not judge, but it reveals. It shows us where our attention has lived and where our faith has been absent or active. There is also a subtle danger in waiting for the right time. This phrase often hides fear beneath logic. While wisdom does involve timing, fear prefers postponement. The right time rarely arrives as a feeling, it arrives as a decision. Time does not reward readiness, it responds to commitment. Those who move first often become ready along the way. Those who wait often discover that time has moved on without them. Understanding that time is never neutral changes how small actions are perceived. A single disciplined choice becomes meaningful. A neglected responsibility becomes costly. There is no such thing as standing still, because even in stillness, time is carrying us forward. The question is not whether time is shaping us, but how. When this truth is fully seen, excuses lose credibility, and awareness begins to replace delay. Living with this understanding does not mean rushing or exhausting oneself. It means aligning daily actions with long-term purpose. It means respecting time enough to show up consistently, even when enthusiasm is absent. When time is honored, it becomes an ally rather than a silent witness to regret. When ignored, It quietly compounds everything we avoid until avoidance itself becomes the habit that defines us. Awareness is often misunderstood as a passive state, as though simply noticing something is enough to change it. In reality, awareness is the most disruptive force in personal growth. The moment you become aware, excuses begin to weaken. Patterns at once felt normal start to feel heavy. Discipline does not begin with force or motivation. It begins with seeing clearly. Until something is seen, it cannot be challenged. Until it is acknowledged, it quietly controls behavior from the background. Many people attempt to build discipline by attacking behavior alone, without examining the awareness beneath it. They try to force routines, habits, and systems while remaining unconscious of why they resist them. This creates inner conflict. Discipline then feels unnatural, harsh, or temporary. Awareness removes this struggle by bringing truth to the surface. When you see how distraction is stealing your attention, how comfort is dulling your urgency, or how fear is shaping your delays, discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like alignment. Awareness reveals the cost of inaction. Without it, laziness feels harmless. With it, every delay becomes visible. You begin to notice how quickly hours disappear, how often intentions are replaced by excuses, how energy is spent on avoidance rather than effort. This observation is not meant to create guilt, but clarity. Guilt weakens discipline. Clarity strengthens it. When the mind sees reality without distortion, action becomes the natural response. Faith deepens awareness by connecting it to meaning. It reminds us that life is not random and that attention itself is a responsibility. To be aware is to be accountable. This is why many people unconsciously avoid awareness. It demands response. Once you see your potential, ignoring it becomes uncomfortable. Once you recognize your role, blaming circumstances loses credibility. Awareness removes the comfort of ignorance and replaces it with the discomfort of truth. Discipline grows when awareness becomes consistent. Noticing patterns once is not enough. Awareness must be practiced daily, in small moments. Honest self-observation. This includes noticing emotional triggers, habitual escapes, and internal dialogue. When you observe yourself without judgment, you create space between impulse and action. In that space, discipline is born. You no longer react automatically, you choose intentionally. There is also a quiet humility in awareness. It requires admitting where you have been careless, inconsistent, or distracted. This humility is not weakness, it is strength. Without it, discipline becomes pride-driven and fragile. With it, discipline becomes grounded and resilient. You stop demanding perfection and start committing to presence. Each moment of awareness reinforces the ability to return to action when you drift. Awareness transforms discipline from something external into something internal. Rules are no longer imposed, they are understood. Effort is no longer forced, it is directed. You begin to recognize that discipline is not about controlling life, but about cooperating with it. When awareness sharpens, discipline follows naturally, because the mind no longer argues against what it clearly sees. The beginning of discipline is not intensity, structure, or motivation. It is the willingness to see yourself honestly, to observe your choices without stories, and to recognize the silent patterns shaping your days. Once awareness is awake, discipline is no longer something you chase. It is something that emerges as the natural expression of clarity. Faith is often spoken of as belief, but belief alone has no weight unless it moves the body, shapes choices, and alters direction. Faith that remains only in thought becomes comfort, not conviction. It may inspire feelings, offer reassurance, and create hope, but without action it never leaves the inner world. True faith carries momentum. It presses forward, asks for obedience, and reveals itself through consistent movement rather than verbal affirmation. Intention feels powerful because it is clean and effortless. It allows us to imagine change without enduring the discomfort of transformation. Many people live in this space, sincerely intending to grow, to serve, to improve, and to become disciplined. Yet intention without action becomes a substitute for obedience. It creates the illusion of progress while leaving reality untouched. Faith challenges this illusion by demanding evidence, not explanation. In spiritual terms, action is the language of belief. What you repeatedly do communicates what you truly trust. If faith teaches that life has purpose, then action becomes the proof that this purpose is taken seriously. Waiting for perfect conditions often disguises fear as wisdom. Faith does not require certainty of outcome. It requires commitment to direction. It steps forward before clarity arrives, trusting that clarity often follows movement. There is a tension between comfort and obedience. Intention aligns with comfort because it costs nothing immediately. Action aligns with faith because it requires surrender. When you act, you release control over how things unfold. This surrender is unsettling, which is why many people hesitate. But faith is not designed to eliminate risk. It is designed to transform how risk is approached. Action becomes an offering, not a guarantee. Faith-driven action also reshapes identity. When you act on what you believe, you begin to see yourself differently. Confidence grows not from affirmation, but from evidence. Each disciplined step reinforces the belief that you are capable of responsibility. This creates a feedback loop where action strengthens faith, and faith fuels further action. Intention alone cannot create this loop because it lacks embodiment. There is also accountability embedded in action. Once you move, you can no longer pretend. Results, resistance, and reality respond. This exposure refines faith. It reveals what was sincere and what was symbolic. Faith that survives contact with effort becomes resilient. Faith that avoids action remains fragile, easily shaken by inconvenience or doubt. Discipline becomes meaningful when it is connected to belief. Without faith, discipline feels mechanical and exhausting. With faith, discipline feels purposeful. Each effort becomes an act of trust, each sacrifice an expression of alignment. Action transforms belief from an idea into a lived experience. Many people wait to feel ready before they act, but faith does not wait for readiness. It moves with reverence, not hesitation. Readiness is often the result of obedience, not the prerequisite. When action is delayed until certainty arrives, faith is replaced by calculation. Faith, by nature, moves first. To live by faith is to accept that intention must eventually submit to action. Belief must leave the mind and enter the body. Words must translate into habits. Without this translation, faith remains incomplete. Action is not the result of faith, it is the demonstration of it. Comfort is often mistaken for peace, but the two are not the same. Peace brings clarity and strength, while comfort often brings numbness. Comfort softens the edges of life, removes friction, and quiets discomfort. But in doing so, it can also silence the inner call to grow. When comfort becomes the primary goal, purpose is slowly pushed aside, not through rebellion, but through preference. The danger is not choosing rest, but choosing ease over meaning. Purpose requires tension. It demands effort, discipline, and the willingness to move toward what is challenging rather than what is convenient. Comfort, on the other hand, seeks familiarity and predictability. It prefers routines that do not stretch identity or test resolve. Time. Comfort begins to define boundaries. Dreams are adjusted to fit convenience. Goals are reduced to avoid strain, and potential is negotiated down to what feels manageable. This delay rarely feels like failure. It feels reasonable. Comfort justifies itself by pointing to exhaustion, timing, and the need for balance. While these concerns can be valid, comfort exploits them by turning temporary needs into permanent excuses. Purpose does not disappear in this process, it waits. But waiting is not neutral. Each delay weakens the sense of urgency and strengthens the habit of avoidance. What once felt important begins to feel optional. Faith reveals the cost of this trade. When life is understood as intentional, comfort becomes a test rather than a reward. The question shifts from what feels good now to what aligns with who I am meant to become. Purpose demands trust because it often leads into uncertainty. Comfort avoids uncertainty by staying within known limits. This is why comfort delays purpose. It keeps you close to safety while purpose calls you beyond it. The longer comfort is obeyed, the more difficult obedience becomes. Effort starts to feel excessive. Discipline feels intrusive. Even small challenges seem overwhelming because the tolerance for discomfort has diminished. Comfort trains the nervous system to resist strain, making growth feel unnatural. Purpose, which requires consistent stretching, begins to feel distant, even unrealistic. There is also a subtle emotional cost. When purpose is delayed, fulfillment is replaced by distraction. Entertainment fills the space where meaning should live. Busyness replaces progress. Yet beneath the surface, dissatisfaction grows. Comfort cannot satisfy the deeper need to contribute, to build, and to become. It can soothe temporarily, but it cannot complete. Reclaiming purpose requires redefining comfort. Comfort must become something that supports growth, not something that replaces it. Rest becomes preparation. Ease becomes recovery. Comfort is no longer the destination, but a tool used briefly before returning to effort. This shift is not about rejecting enjoyment, but about restoring order. Purpose leads, comfort follows. Discipline plays a crucial role in this restoration. Discipline creates intentional discomfort in service of long-term meaning. It reminds the body and mind that ease is not the ultimate authority. Each disciplined act weakens comfort's control and strengthens commitment to purpose. Over time, discomfort becomes familiar, and effort becomes less intimidating. Purpose does not demand constant struggle, but it does require consistent courage. It asks for movement even when comfort argues for delay. When this courage is practiced, comfort loses its power to postpone becoming. Life regains direction, urgency returns, and the quiet tension between ease and meaning resolves in favor of growth. Procrastination is rarely about time management. It is about identity management. It shapes how a person sees themselves and quietly reinforces a narrative of avoidance. Each time a task is delayed, the mind absorbs a subtle message that action is optional and commitment is flexible. Over time, this message becomes belief, and belief hardens into identity. What begins as a small delay slowly transforms into a habitual way of being. The mind seeks consistency between action and self-image. When procrastination becomes frequent, the identity adjusts to match it. A person no longer sees themselves as someone who acts decisively, but as someone who works better under pressure or needs the right mood. These labels feel harmless, even clever, but they protect avoidance. Identity begins to bend around delay, making discipline feel foreign and effort feel forced. Procrastination also erodes self-trust. Each postponed action is a broken promise to oneself. While the mind may rationalize the delay, the deeper self records it. Confidence does not collapse suddenly. It fades gradually as self-respect weakens. The more often commitments are ignored, the harder it becomes to believe in future intentions. Identity shifts from being reliable to being negotiable. This erosion has emotional consequences. Guilt and anxiety often follow procrastination, not because of the task itself, but because of the inner conflict it creates. The mind knows what should be done, yet avoids doing it. This tension drains energy and reinforces avoidance as a coping mechanism. Procrastination becomes both the cause and the escape from discomfort, creating a cycle that tightens over time. Faith reframes this struggle by connecting identity to responsibility. When life is seen as purposeful, actions carry meaning beyond productivity. Delaying responsibility is no longer just inefficiency, it is misalignment. Identity in this light is not something chosen passively, but something shaped through obedience. Each act of discipline strengthens the belief that one is capable, accountable, and aligned. Breaking procrastination requires more than motivation. It requires redefining identity. Action must come before confidence, not after it. When you act despite resistance, identity begins to shift. You no longer wait to feel like a disciplined person. You become one through behavior. Each completed task restores self-trust and weakens the internal narrative of delay. Small actions are especially powerful in this process. Procrastination thrives on overwhelm, but identity changes through consistency. When actions are kept manageable, resistance decreases and follow-through increases. This creates momentum. Momentum reinforces identity. Over time, disciplines stop, feeling unnatural because it aligns with who you believe you are becoming. There is also humility in confronting procrastination. It requires admitting that avoidance has cost more than it has protected. This admission is uncomfortable, but it is also freeing. It allows responsibility to replace excuse. Once responsibility is accepted, identity begins to stabilize. You no longer define yourself by mood, circumstance, or pressure, but by choice. Procrastination weakens identity by teaching the mind to doubt its own authority. Discipline restores identity by proving that choice matters. Each moment of action, no matter how small, becomes evidence of reliability. As this evidence accumulates, identity strengthens, resistance diminishes, and the person you see in yourself begins to match the person you are willing to act as. Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction, as though it exists to limit freedom rather than express belief. In reality, discipline is a visible form of what a person trusts. What you are willing to do consistently, even when it is uncomfortable, reveals what you believe about yourself, your future, and the meaning of your effort. Discipline is not enforced from the outside. It grows from conviction on the inside. Belief without discipline remains theoretical. It may inspire thoughts and emotions, but it does not alter behavior. Discipline translates belief into structure. It gives faith a schedule, a rhythm, and a form. When someone says they believe in growth, purpose, or responsibility, discipline becomes the proof. Without it, belief remains symbolic, easily reshaped by mood or circumstance. There is a deep connection between trust and consistency. When you truly believe something matters, you show up for it repeatedly. Discipline is simply the habit of honoring that belief daily. This is why discipline cannot be sustained through force alone. Force exhausts willpower. Belief sustains effort. When discipline is aligned with belief, it feels demanding but meaningful. When it is not, it feels empty and oppressive. Faith strengthens this alignment by anchoring discipline to something greater than immediate reward. It teaches that effort is not wasted even when results are delayed. Discipline becomes an act of trust rather than a transaction. You act not because success is guaranteed, but because obedience is valued. This shift removes the constant negotiation that weakens consistency. Discipline becomes non-negotiable because belief is settled. Discipline also clarifies priorities. Time, energy, and attention are limited. What you discipline yourself to protect reveals what you value most. If comfort is protected, discipline erodes. If purpose is protected, discipline sharpens. Over time, discipline shapes the environment around you. Distractions are reduced, habits are reinforced, and life begins to reflect inner conviction. There is also identity reinforcement within discipline. Each disciplined act sends a message to the mind that you are someone who follows through. This message compounds. Confidence grows not from affirmation, but from repeated evidence. Discipline becomes self-fulfilling. The more you practice it, the more natural it feels, because it aligns with the identity being formed. Discipline does not eliminate struggle, it reframes it. Resistance is no longer a sign to stop, but a signal that belief is being tested. When discipline is rooted in belief, resistance strengthens resolve rather than weakening it. Effort becomes meaningful, not merely difficult. Even fatigue carries purpose. Without belief, discipline collapses under pressure. With belief, discipline endures inconvenience, delay, and uncertainty. This endurance is not stubbornness. It is trust in unseen outcomes. Discipline becomes a daily declaration that what you believe is worth acting on. To live with discipline is to live honestly. It means allowing actions to reflect convictions. It means closing the gap between what is said and what is done. Discipline is belief made visible through routine, effort, and commitment, revealing not only what you believe, but who you are becoming through that belief. Becoming is not an event that happens in the future. It is a process that unfolds in the present. Many people imagine change as a sudden transformation, a moment when everything aligns and excuses disappear. In reality, becoming begins quietly, at the precise moment when excuses are no longer accepted as truth. This shift is subtle but powerful because it marks the transition from intention to ownership. Excuses often sound reasonable. They borrow language from logic, fatigue, and circumstance. They explain why action is delayed without appearing dishonest. Yet every excuse carries a hidden message that responsibility can wait. Over time, this message conditions the mind to seek permission to avoid effort. Becoming cannot coexist with this permission. Growth demands authority over one's choices, not negotiation with comfort. The moment excuses end, clarity emerges. Action becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer. Energy previously spent justifying inaction is redirected into movement. Excuses create mental noise, their absence creates focus. This focus allows small decisions to matter again. A single step taken without debate restores a sense of agency that excuses gradually erode. Faith plays a crucial role in this transition. It reframes difficulty as meaningful rather than inconvenient. When excuses are removed, effort is no longer evaluated by how it feels, but by what it serves. Faith replaces self-pity with purpose. It reminds the individual that struggle is not a sign of failure, but a signal of alignment with growth. Ending excuses also exposes fear. Excuses often exist to protect identity from risk. Without them, vulnerability increases. Action becomes visible, and so does the possibility of falling short. Yet this exposure is necessary. Becoming requires contact with reality. It is only through action that strengths are discovered and weaknesses refined. Excuses delay this discovery and keep identity untested. Consistency emerges naturally once excuses are dismissed. Discipline no longer depends on mood or motivation. Action becomes a standard rather than an option. This standard creates momentum. Momentum reinforces belief. Over time, the effort that once felt heavy becomes familiar, and familiarity reduces resistance. What was once avoided becomes routine. There is also a deep sense of self-respect that grows when excuses end. Each action taken strengthens trust in oneself. This trust cannot be built through planning or affirmation alone. It requires follow-through. Becoming is not about perfection, but about reliability. The person you are becoming is shaped by what you do when excuses would have been easiest. Excuses keep the future abstract. Action makes it tangible. When excuses end, the future begins to take shape through daily behavior. Vision becomes grounded. Dreams become measurable. Progress becomes visible, even if slow. This visibility sustains commitment far more effectively than motivation ever could. Becoming is not dramatic. It is repetitive. It is choosing effort again and again in small moments. It is refusing to argue with responsibility. It is accepting that excuses offer comfort but steal direction. When excuses are removed, life regains movement. Identity gains strength, and the process of becoming moves from imagination into lived experience.